And again, mazel tov to the family.
So with that, I want to share some thoughts with you. Just get ready here. So let me tell you about a Jewish guy I heard about. His name was Gottlieb. Mr. Gottlieb called his rabbi the night of getting ready for Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, Kol Nidre. And he says, I have a problem, Rabbi. Tonight is the playoffs, and the Red Sox are in it. They're in it to win it. They're going to win it this year. It's not a true story. And I got a problem. What do? I got to watch them on TV. The rabbi says, there's not a problem, right? That's what God made DVRs for. Use the DVR. To which Gottlieb said, surprised, Rabbi, you are so with it. You're so modern. Who knew you could DVR Kol Nidre? A young boy goes to his Sunday school, and he comes late to Sunday school, and the teacher says, usually little Johnny, it's always little Johnny, you're usually on time. You're not late. Is everything okay? Yeah, it's fine. I went fishing this morning, and my father said, you know what, you need to go to Sunday school. And the teacher says, wow, that is really impressive, little Johnny. Your father has some great values. Did he explain to you why you had to come to Sunday school over fishing? Little Johnny said, yeah. My dad said we don't have enough bait for the both of us, every man for himself, right? And finally, this is actually supposedly a true story told by former Vice President Al Gore, who was talking about former Senator Bill Bradley. Senator Bradley once attended a very formal dinner where he was the guest speaker. And he was served his food, and they brought him his mashed potatoes, and there was only one pat of butter on the mashed potatoes. And he wanted a second pat of butter. So he flagged down the waiter. He said, excuse me, can I have another pat of butter? And the waiter said, I'm sorry, we only serve one pat of butter with mashed potatoes at this country club. Senator Bradley says, do you know who I am? Right? I am Senator Bradley, the senator from New Jersey. I'm a former NBA All-Star. He cleared his throat and got louder, and he said, I'm a Rhodes Scholar. I currently serve on the International Trade and Long-Term Growth Committee and Debt and Deficit Reduction Committee. I'm in charge of taxation and IRS oversight, and I'd like another pat of butter, and I'd like it now. The waiter looked down at the senator and said, Senator, do you know who I am? And Senator Bradley arrogantly said, no, I don't know who you are. To which the waiter responded, I'm the guy in charge of the butter. I want to talk about values, core values, right? Standing for something more than our titles, more than what the world says about us, but what's at our center, right? What's at our core? Because we need core values. We need them strong, we need to hold on to them and return to them. Because at the end of life, this is the stuff we talk about, core values. I call it the death test, right? The death test. I'm looking, Rabbi Weiss is a rabbi. He sat with many people who are dying, just like I and other clergy. And I bet Rabbi Weiss would say the same thing that Harold Kushner said. I've never sat with somebody at the end of their life when they said, Rabbi, I wish I would have spent more time at the office. Nobody has ever said that on their deathbed, right? I have never sat with anybody who has said, Rabbi, I can't die yet. I have so many unanswered emails, 2,200, I just can't die yet. I've never met anybody as they're dying who said, I wish I would have tweeted more, right? During my life, I wish I would have deepened my Facebook friendships. Nobody has ever or will ever say that. Nobody has ever said, if only I would have had 20 minutes a day devoted during my lifetime to sculpting my abs. Nobody has ever said those words on their deathbed. Nobody has ever said, why didn't I watch all 9 seasons of 24, right? Actually, you should put it on your bucket list. That's actually worth it. Nobody has ever said on their deathbed, I can't die yet. It's not time. There are still seasons of American Idol yet to be sung. Nobody will say those words because they're not core values. What do people talk about when they're dying? What do people talk about when they gather with me or Rabbi Weiss or others to write the eulogy of a loved one, the bereaved? What do they talk about? They talk about family. They talk about community, religion, relationships, God, tzedakah, giving, and love. These are core values. These should be at the center of our life. But the challenge is we're human. And we sometimes forget and get caught up in our titles, like Senator Bradley did at that moment, or like the congregant who forgets what's ultimately important, or like little Johnny's dad who just gets caught up in their hobbies, turning them into something more than they are, little games and ways to occupy our time. But core values are not games, and core values are not ways to just occupy our time. Core values are why we are here, and I imagine what every one of us wants our rabbi or our minister or our priest to say when we are dead, when we are lying in the casket. What do we want them to talk about? We want them to talk about not only did we have core values, but that we embodied those core values. We lived those core values with every moment of our life. But it's hard. It's very difficult to keep up with that. Why? Because of what Stephen Covey, the world-renowned author, speaker, thinker, business, motivational psychology, said in one of his books. I forget which one. Maybe it was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He wrote, "It's incredibly easy to get caught up in an activity trap, in the busyness of life, to work harder and harder and harder and climb higher and higher and higher on the ladder of success, only to get to the very top, which we've worked and clamored to get to find out what? That it was leaning against the wrong wall. And sometimes some of the ladders that we climb, that we scurry up, that we scamper up, that we step on other people and things to get to the top of, we get there to find that, in fact, they weren't built on core values. We find out they were leaning against the wrong wall. You can spend your days and your months and your years and your life winning all kinds of battles, right? Winning all kinds of victories, climbing up all kinds of ladders to end up at the end of life to realize that you maybe have lost the war. Maybe you have been climbing up ladders that were leaning against the wrong wall. And that's why we read this week's Torah portion. I mean, let me just say it. Thank God we're concluding the book of Leviticus. It is not easy going, and it's not easy going for our B'nai Mitzvah, right? Every spring to be right around the book of Leviticus and also Bar Bat Mitzvah season, and to charge them with the task of taking the most difficult book of the Torah and making it relevant. It's not easy. This particular Torah portion, Behar, is easier than most in the book of Leviticus. It deals with something that may not be specifically relevant to our modern lives, but the values of it are relevant. Alex spoke about it a few minutes ago, and he spoke about what we call the Shemitah year. Shemitah is a fancy word for a sabbatical year. We read in this week's Torah portion, "Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe b'har Sinai lemor, daber el b'nei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem." God spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, Ki tavo'u el ha'aretz asher ani noten lechem," that when you come to the land of Israel, which I have given to you, v'shavta ha'aretz Shabbat la'Adonai. Make sure you don't just have a Shabbat, a Sabbath for yourself every 7 days. It's a mitzvah, it's a commandment. However, make sure you also have a Shabbat of the land. A very relevant idea. Just from an environmental perspective, right? To give the land a rest, to give it a break. But also from a human perspective. It isn't just about the land, it's about us. What are we supposed to do during the Shemitah year, that 7th year? We're not allowed to work the land. We're not allowed to pick the grapes. We're not allowed to fence off the land. We have to open it up to the animals and the birds and the people who come and go and pass through those fields. We have to simply, every 7 years, take a break. Or every 7 days with Shabbat, get some clarity, get some perspective. Because ultimately, isn't that what a sabbatical is all about? At least I imagine that's what a sabbatical is all about. I look forward to telling you that firsthand someday. But a sabbatical, we all have one, even if it's not every 7 years, then every 7 days. Or maybe it's a couple times a day, 3 times a day, says our tradition, that we take a moment and we meditate or we pray. We take a step back from the routine, from the busyness, and we get some clarity. Because we all need clarity to get clear about what is important in our lives. And it's really simple. And sometimes people will challenge me. I'll get emails and saying, "Rabbi, it's just so simple, this talk that you just gave." But that doesn't mean that it's not true. And it doesn't mean that it's simplistic, right? Simple is a beautiful thing. One of my favorite books from a long time ago was Robert Fullam's All I Ever Needed to Know or Learn, I Learned in Kindergarten, right? because the simple truths of life are simple. And the hard part is living them. The hard part is embodying those simple truths. We need time to step away from the busyness and the hustle and the bustle to get clear about our core values, to think about what ladder are we climbing up. Because oftentimes we start climbing, and after a while, we forget why we're climbing. We forget where we're climbing to. We forget who it is that's actually climbing. Some of the things that there's the little climbers walking towards me down the aisle here. He's just learning how to climb. Some of the things we climb upon are not based on core values. Maybe it's a job that we started, but we didn't actually set out to make a lifetime doing. Maybe we had a profession that was about a core value, but we put it off because we started climbing another ladder. Maybe it's a relationship that's not good for us, and we're somewhere in the middle of the ladder, and we don't know to go up or to go down. Maybe it's an activity that isn't good for us, that we started, and now it's a habit, and a habit is a routine, and a routine is a rut, and a rut, as has been said, is a grave with both ends knocked out. Maybe we're just stuck in the busyness and the climbing and the clamoring, and we'll make it there, and we'll make it to the top to find out that it was a ladder leaning against the wrong wall. And there are so many ladders in our lives that we want to climb, but you can't climb it all. That's what it means to grow up, to realize you have to be selective and you have to choose, and hopefully you get some clarity and you get some perspective and you learn to choose wisely so that when the time for the death test comes, right, the rabbi or your minister or your priest talks about the core values, and that you made time for the core values, and that you made time and put them in your jar. I want to share with you a teaching. It's a visual teaching. It's what I would call a visual midrash that I learned maybe 20 years ago, and it's always stuck with me, and I've always actually wanted to do this. It's kind of a cross between a sermon and a science experiment, and it gets a little messy. I feel like we should have passed out some of those aprons for the front row. I feel kind of like Gallagher. Remember Gallagher? So I'm not going to smash any watermelons, don't worry. But I have been thinking about a philosophy professor who shared this years ago in front of his class, and I'm going to share this with you now as I get my props. So a philosophy professor said, look, here's life. Here's your life. It's a jar. Maybe some of you have heard this, but you'll bear with me. Right? And in this jar, you're going to put all of the things that you do, all of the things that you're about, all of the things that you're committed to, right? That's how you fill up your jar. I have two jars. First, I'm going to show you the way, unfortunately, most of us live our lives, and we run out of time. So this philosophy professor said, here's how it goes. In this jar, you have three choices of three different things to put into the jar, right? You can put in rocks, which are core values. You can put in small stones, right, which are the necessary things you got to do to live out those core values. Or you can put in sand, or you can put in dirt. And here's the challenge, and the dirt is all of the things that aren't necessary. They may not be wrong, but it's the stuff that we fill up our days with, unfortunately, putting those things forward. So all too often we start off filling our day up with emails and tweets and 3.5 hours of television and that stupid game that absorbs my life, Angry Birds. I have no idea why I'm addicted, but Angry Birds are in this jar, right? And then what do? After we filled our day, we work in the paying the bills, and we work in the cleaning, and we work in the cooking, and we work in the taking care of our bodies, and we work, what else do we work in? We work in mowing the lawn. That was a sermon 2 weeks ago. And what else do we work in? Give me some other ones that we have to do to get the dishes, the laundry. Everybody hates the laundry. Right, what else? Give me one. I got one more we do. I heard 10 things, but I'll go with grocery shopping because I help out with that one. And so what do? We fill our days, we fill our time with all of the unnecessary stuff and all of the necessary stuff. And then comes our marriage, and then comes our children, and then comes our, what else? Our relationship with community, and our relationship with God, and our relationship with friends and family, and it doesn't all fit in. It just doesn't, no matter how hard we try. However, he said there is a way, right, to live your life. And it's starting with the same amount of stuff. But first you put in your marriage. And then you put in your relationship with your children. And then you put in your relationship with your community and relationship with God. And you put in your relationship with all of the important things of your life. And then you put in all of the things that are necessary, right? The bills and the shopping and the housekeeping. It's the same amount of material. I measured it out. And if you put in everything in the right order, right, what does this teacher teach us? That ultimately you still have time for the TV, and you still have time for the tweets, and you still have time for all the emails, and you still have time even for Angry Birds, right? It's about perspective. It's about values. And you still have time left over. There's more to come, right? This is the idea that we must lead with the core values. We must lead with the rocks. We must lead with those foundational things that are important to us, that pass muster, that pass the death test, because otherwise we end up, when it comes time for the death test, leaving the things out, the rocks out, that are most important, that are most critical, but they come secondary. We will be remembered, and we'll be remembered well, and we will have passed the death test if and only if we get clarity over what is important, if and only if we put the rocks into our jar first and foremost, and then everything will properly follow along, and we will climb the ladder of success, and we will get to the top, and we will realize, God willing, that it was leaning against the right wall. And so with that, we are going to go into the rocks in our life and in our children's life. We're going to go into the teacher appreciation little ceremony, because our children are our rocks. They're our core values, and we hand them over, our precious little souls, to teachers. Right? And in the Jewish tradition, the most important thing in our lives, our rocks, should be handed over to people who know how to rear those children and inspire those children and teach those children. So we're going to invite all of the teachers who are here and out in the hallway to come in. We are going to invite them in with our children, and how about we'll invite them in with a nigun.